Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with these nerds.
Nathan Nerdark.
Nerdarchy is Ted.
We continue our series, Why 5th Edition Dungeons & Dragons Needs a Dark Sun, with revised races.
Hey guys, jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
So we return to the burning sands of Athos. This time, we have re-envisioned races. Dark Sun, they were one of the early D&D campaigns to really change how certain races that were traditional fantasy races were perceived. Let's just start with the elves, right? So the elves became these nomadic tribes that would run across the burning sands. And it was kind of like a big deal because their social structure essentially was, one, like if you couldn't keep up with the tribe because they ran everywhere, literally ran everywhere, and if you couldn't keep trucking along, they left you behind. I believe there was like a secondary like train for them that would be like the children and the old people pretty much. And literally, like if you were an adult and you mattered, you would be with the rest of the tribe running.
Yes. And like there's literally a picture in one of the books where like the legs are like splayed out, crazily. It's like, man, that's nuts. People don't bend like that.
And
Well, flexible elves, I guess, can do.
yeah. And one of the things too is elves were kind of pessimistic in Dark Sun as well. I mean, everybody kind of is, but like it was kind of weird for the elves that's naturally one of their traits. I mean, one of the Athasian elves' adages was, always expect the worst, so all your surprises are good.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing that, but it was essentially along those lines.
Well, when you have all of your ancestral homes gone, pretty much. It's understandable.
When you're used to being a forest dwelling, race, and there are no forests, it pretty much sucks. And the Athasian elves are actually taller than regular elves. They actually, capped out at like 6.5 feet as opposed to like 5.5 feet. So it was kind of...
Actually, I believe the Athasian elves were one of the taller races.
Yes.
Next to things like maybe the Maul or the half giant.
Correct.
Honorable mention, along with Athasian elves, would be Athasian half-elves. If you're an Athasian half-elf and you are not raised by your human parentage, you would actually find yourself, even in adulthood, in that secondary train with the old people and the children, which means you're essentially a second-class citizen amongst them.
Yes.
They're not gonna respect you. They're gonna look down on you. It is kind of ugly.
Because the kids could at least grow older and move up.
Right.
To the primary age run.
So moving on, we have dwarves.
Okay, now dwarves is your area of specialty, and dwarves were known, to typically like, okay, they're in the mountains, they're all about forges, they're hard workers, underground.
And there was always that question if the female dwarves have beards.
In Athasian dwarves, there is no question. Nobody does. So I don't know if you can call Athasian dwarves my thing or not. But yeah, they're completely different, and they're also super muscular. They were always depicted as like these micro bodybuilders, as
jerked.
They literally look like just blocks, right, of muscle. Because in Athasian, in Athos, I should say, none of the Athasian races really wore much clothes. It's very sand and sandals kind of setting. It's always hot, So which oddly enough, because in the real world, people usually cover head to toe in the desert to keep the sun off them.
But people are also very poor.
but in the fantasy world, it's the opposite. Everyone wears a bikini, even the dudes. Yeah, so they were always depicted as being very square, blocky, and super muscular. They did have hair on the top of their head, so they were not completely hairless like mules or moles. And the other defining trait for them, other than all that stuff that makes them basically not dwarves, is the fact that they had this life focus. And they believed that if they didn't work towards that life focus and complete it someday, their spirits would come back as ghosts.
So it was really this whole like conceptual change with the dwarves that was just weird when you're used to seeing them in the typical fantasy tropes.
Yeah, the things that remained were their hardiness and basically their dedication to task.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it was even more focused.
But I mean, when you have a world that's barren of metal, and dwarves are meant to forge, Well, without metal, you can't really get into the forge.
Right. That's
And-
why I said tasks.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, like, I enjoy the process of how it was re-envisioned.
Speaking of re-envisioning, I really enjoy the way they re-envisioned halflings.
The halflings in Athos are quite a perverse change from the typical lighthearted, childlike atmosphere that they are in the typical fantasy setting.
These are not your father's hobbits. That's for sure.
So these guys,
It's gone feral.
it's exactly it. They're not civilized the way one would expect. They are in fact cannibals. What is it? Was it elves that they chose to eat, or was that the
thri-kreen preferred elves.
Okay?
My argument is they're not necessarily cannibals, but they do eat other sentient species.
They don't eat other halflings. They actually have a special relationship with other halflings, and they also consider themselves kind of they have this sense of racial superiority about themselves, and they are one of the few races in Athos to live in verdant lands.
So they did kind of feel like they were the natural race, which is quite the anathema to the typical fantasy world where humans feel that they're the superior race.
And also, if any of the races have a connection to druidic magic, I'm going to have to go out on a limb and say it is actually the halflings. And also, they were featured prominently in various novels throughout the Dark Sun run as well. And always like they had these like pocket locations where the world was still verdant and it was basically inhabited by halflings, and those halflings, they were able to live with as one with nature, and they also exhibited strong spellcasters as well. So there's definitely some interesting twists with the halfling going on.
Another twist they had that I think is in a further supplement is the life shaping ability, where they can take kind of like bioorganic items, like magic items, but they're made out of living things and attach them to their body to do different things, like breathe air or hook stuff or be able to attack from a distance.
This guy right here has kind of got one on his arm.
So that was another unique aspect to the Dark Sun halfling.
So in the early days of Athos, before things actually started, which was part of the creation of it, was the cleansing war. And
this changed a lot of races, predominantly forever in Athos,
because they were literally eradicated. Races that were just wiped off the face of the earth. There were champions of this one sorcerer king, Rajat, and we're like, all right, you're gonna go off, and it's your task to literally wipe out an entire race.
And we can get more in detail of that when we talk about the Sorcerer Kings and their champions.
So yeah, from AD&D, there are no half-orcs, there are no gnomes, and of course, 5th edition races that didn't exist, like the Tiefling and Dragonborn, they're not there to even worry about. So these are the major changes that have been made or revised, I should say, for races in Athos that you might have known from your traditional Dungeons & Dragons game. But the question is, guys, what do you think of Dark Sun? Would you like to see a 5th edition version of it? Let us know in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can check us out over at nerdarchy.com.
Or you can hang out with us over on Facebook.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.